From a visual perspective, Baldur's Gate 3 is a pretty good experience on PS5 hardware. But what about the game's frame rates? The game's performance mode targets 60 FPS, and for the most part it does seem to reach that target. Interior areas and most of the game's exterior landscapes run just fine at 60, including combat scenes. I did notice that certain cutscenes do seem to run beneath this target, but these moments are pretty fleeting. The Grove area in the first act also sees some little dips when you walk around. Nothing too severe, but worth noting. But there are areas that don't fare quite as well. Namely, the city area from the game's third act is much heavier than the areas from the first act that we sampled, with performance dropping into the low 20s at worst. As far as I can tell, these issues probably shouldn't arise before this section, as the many hours of gameplay that precede it don't feature large NPC-dense cities like this. It's also worth noting the tearing here. Baldur's Gate 3 has some tearing in roughly the top 20% of the screen during typical gameplay when the framerate is dropping below 60 FPS, on the order of a few frames every second or so. It's a little bit annoying to be sure, but it does preserve a bit of input response at the expense of hurting image quality. For a turn-based game like this, I probably would have elected to just hold VSync regardless, but this is a choice that developers sometimes do make. But there's another tearing issue at hand, and it's one we haven't seen in a while. A small portion of the screen at the bottom of the frame suffers from near constant tearing when the game is dropping frames. The game seems to be flipping its frame buffer early, essentially producing more tearing than we would otherwise typically see in a game that's trying to limit screen tearing to a small screen area. I suspect this is probably a bug, as it looks quite unsightly once you do notice it. Baldur's Gate 3 also has a quality mode, of course, and this is where the game's performance does firm up quite a bit. The new framerate target here is 30 FPS, and the game does an excellent job of hitting that figure. I couldn't seem to provoke any issues in Act 1 at all, as the game proceeds at a locked 30 FPS, regardless of what I throw at it. My only real complaint here is the complete lack of motion blur, which makes the 30 FPS update feel a bit choppier than it probably should. But Act 3 again poses certain issues. Around this NPC-dense archway, we see frame rates again drop to the mid to low 20s, with highly inconsistent animation. Other parts of the city also provoke drops, though not quite as severe. For whatever reason, Larian has opted to retain VSync here, unlike the performance mode, so there is no screen tearing whatsoever, even when the frame rates are low. Running the performance and quality mode framerate readouts back to back, I strongly suspect that the game is severely CPU limited in this Act 3 area. There's virtually no difference in frame rates, suggesting that there is a CPU bottleneck in both visual modes. This also tracks with our testing of the PC version, which suffers from heavily CPU-bound performance in this area.